One evening in February 2010, the McStay family, Joseph, his wife Summer, and their two little kids, seemed to vanish into thin air. Their cozy home in California looked mostly normal. Dinner was half-cooked, toys were left around, and their dogs were there but uncared for. But something felt wrong. The family's car was gone, their phones were off, and as the days went by, no one heard from them. As the police started digging into the case, they uncovered a mystery full of secrets and betrayal. What happened to the McStay family? And how did no one notice what was coming? Joseph, Summer, Gianni, and Joseph Jr. were a joyful family, living in a lovely new home in Fallbrook, California. Joseph, the family's main provider, ran a successful decorative fountain business. February 4th, 2010, began as a regular day for the family. Joseph called his father, Patrick, to explain that he was running late for a business lunch. Meanwhile, Summer had been in touch with her sister, who had recently given birth, telling her that she was busy setting things up in their new home. Over the next few days, communication from Joseph and Summer to their relatives abruptly stopped. While some thought it was simply due to their busy lives and caring for two young children, Joseph's father, Patrick, found the situation odd. He had a close relationship with his son and wasn't used to being ignored. As his concern grew, he asked his other son, Michael, to check on Joseph's home. At first, Michael didn't share the same level of worry, believing that his brother was simply caught up in daily tasks and would reconnect soon. Patrick, however, persisted, and eventually, Michael agreed to visit the house. When Michael arrived, he noticed that the family car was gone, but their dogs were still at the house, seemingly uncared for. The doors were locked, but Michael managed to get inside through a window. Inside, things were off. There was spoiled food in the kitchen and popcorn scattered in the living room. Despite these oddities, Michael initially thought the family had gone on a trip. However, it was unusual that they hadn't told anyone, so Michael alerted the authorities to his brother's disappearance. The police found no sign of forced entry or violence, though it seemed the family had left in a hurry. By February 8th, the family's car was discovered abandoned near the border crossing between the U.S. and Mexico. Surveillance footage from the border showed a family of 4 walking into Mexico, but the video quality was poor, leaving the police uncertain if it was indeed the McStays. Further investigation revealed that Summer had recently searched for information about Mexico on her computer, leading to speculation that the family had left voluntarily. However, Joseph's father, Patrick, firmly believed that his son would never leave without informing anyone. Joseph's mother, after viewing the footage, was sure the man shown was not Joseph, based on his walk. Michael and Susan took over Joseph's business, while Patrick felt increasingly left out, especially as he was estranged from Susan and had little contact with Michael. Months passed with no solid leads, and the case was handed over to the FBI by April 2010. Unfortunately, the authorities still considered the family's disappearance a voluntary departure, resulting in a lack of exhaustive efforts to find them. The absence of any clear evidence of a crime also prevented police from obtaining access to Joseph's financial records. For more than 3 years, the case remained cold until November 13, 2013, when a motorcyclist stumbled upon a horrific discovery while riding in the Mojave Desert. He found what appeared to be a child's skull and promptly notified the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. Upon further investigation, authorities uncovered 2 shallow graves containing the remains of 4 people, 2 adults and 2 children. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Joseph, Summer, Gianni, and Joseph Jr. Alongside the remains, a 3-pound sledgehammer was found, identified as the murder weapon. Forensic examinations concluded that the family had died from blunt force trauma, likely having been tortured before their deaths. The autopsy revealed that young Joseph Jr. had suffered multiple severe blows to the head, while Joseph Sr. was found with an electrical cord wrapped around his neck. With this grim discovery, the case took a dark turn and was now considered a homicide. Investigators began reconstructing the family's final months by interviewing friends, family, and examining phone records and security footage. A key breakthrough came when security footage from a neighbor's camera revealed that the last person to meet with Joseph on February 4th was his business partner, Charles Chase Merritt. Prior to the discovery of the bodies, Chase had been interviewed by authorities, during which he claimed to have spoken with Joseph on the phone at least twice on the day of the disappearance. Chase had also told the media that Joseph was his best friend, and in one interview, he mentioned being the last person to see Joseph, a statement that raised suspicion among detectives. Chase's behavior after the disappearance was concerning. In an early police interview, he referred to Joseph in the past tense, saying, "He was my best friend." When questioned about this after the bodies were found, Chase claimed he hadn't realized he was speaking that way. Chase had also told police that on February 4th, he and Joseph had a business meeting over lunch to discuss financial matters. During that meeting, Chase said Joseph gave him physical copies of checks for ongoing projects. Further investigation into these checks revealed discrepancies. Digital records indicated that while the checks were dated February 4th, they had actually been written several days after the family disappeared. This led investigators to suspect that Chase had forged the checks to make it appear as though they had been issued before the disappearance. Moreover, detectives uncovered that Chase had a gambling addiction and had been stealing money from Joseph's business accounts for months. It was speculated that Joseph had discovered this, leading to tension between the two and possibly providing Chase with a motive for murder. Police later uncovered that Chase had also issued checks totaling over $21,000 from Joseph McStay's business account in the days following the family's murder. Merritt then went on gambling sprees, losing significant amounts of money in casinos. A bank's customer service employees also revealed to investigators that someone claiming to be Joseph McStay had called to request the complete deletion of his account and all related information. However, the caller failed to provide the correct password, so the request couldn't be processed. When authorities traced the call, they discovered it came not from Joseph's phone, but from Charles Merritt's. Further investigation revealed that on February 1st, Joseph had sent an email claiming that Chase owed him almost $43,000. Adding to this, cell phone data placed Merritt in the Mojave Desert 2 days after the McStay family disappeared. Authorities believed Merritt knew the area well, having grown up nearby. During the investigation, police also received a DNA profile from the McStay family car. DNA found on the steering column and gear shift matched Charles Merritt. With mounting evidence against Merritt, detectives concluded that he had murdered the McStay family. The theory proposed by investigators was that Merritt had killed the family with a sledgehammer, transported their bodies to the Mojave Desert, and buried them in shallow graves. He then drove the family's car to the border near Mexico, abandoning it there to mislead investigators into believing that the family had fled to Mexico. It's also believed that Merritt was the one who conducted searches about Mexico on Summer's computer. On November 5, 2014, Charles Merritt was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Though he vehemently denied the accusations, he was arrested and brought to trial. However, the trial faced numerous delays as Merritt fired several of his attorneys and even attempted to represent himself at one point. Over the span of 2 years, he cycled through 5 different lawyers. The trial finally began on January 7, 2019. Prosecutors entered the trial confident in their case, presenting substantial evidence linking Merritt to the murders, along with a clear motive. They argued that Joseph had confronted Merritt about the money he had been stealing from the business, threatening to report him to the authorities. Merritt, who had a criminal record involving theft and fraud, panicked, fearing a lengthy prison sentence. As a result, prosecutors suggested he decided to kill Joseph and his entire family to silence them. The prosecution believed that Merritt first killed Joseph and then lured Summer and the children to their deaths. After murdering the family, Merritt hid the bodies for 2 days, during which time he accessed Joseph's bank account and issued the fraudulent checks. On February 6th, he allegedly transported the bodies to the desert, dug 2 shallow graves, and buried them along with the murder weapon. He later abandoned the family car near the border, though his DNA left inside the vehicle would become crucial evidence. During the trial, the prosecution presented security footage that supposedly showed Merritt's truck leaving the McStay residence. However, the video was blurry, leading to debate over whether it truly was Merritt's truck. The defense seized on this and other inconsistencies, including the unclear location of the murders. Prosecutors could not definitively say if the killings occurred in the family home or elsewhere, such as the desert. Merritt's defense team argued that he had an alibi. His girlfriend at the time testified that Merritt was with her at home on the night of February 4, 2010. His daughter also stated that she remembered her father being home that night. As for Merritt's cell phone data placing him in the Mojave Desert on February 6th, the defense explained that he could have been in the area to visit his sister. Juanita, Chase's sister, testified that her brother frequently visited her, though she couldn't recall if he had visited on that specific day. However, prosecutors confronted Juanita with a recorded police interview from 2013 in which she claimed that Charles rarely visited her and hadn't done so for 5 years, which contradicted her trial testimony. The defense also tried several tactics to derail the trial, including accusing prosecutors of withholding evidence and requesting that key figures in the case be removed. However, the judge overseeing the case rejected these motions, allowing the trial to proceed. Chase Merritt's defense attorneys argued that the prosecution failed to thoroughly investigate other individuals who had motives to harm Joseph McStay. They pointed to 3 men they considered persons of interest, with the first being Joseph's brother, Michael McStay. When Michael took the stand, Charles Merritt's attorney asked him several pointed questions, suggesting he could be responsible for the crime. The lawyer inquired about Michael's relationship with his brother, to which both Michael and the rest of the family asserted that it was good. However, the defense raised doubts, questioning why Michael did not immediately go to check on his brother's home and why he was slow to report the family's disappearance. In response, Michael admitted that he hadn't been overly concerned at first, thinking his brother had simply gone on a trip with his family. The defense also suggested that the truck seen in the security footage could have been Michael's, not Charles. But a particularly strange detail that led some people to suspect Michael was that before the family's bodies were found, he told officers that he hoped they weren't buried in shallow graves. This statement caused significant debate, as the McStay family was indeed discovered in shallow graves in the Mojave Desert. Many found it suspicious that Michael could have imagined this scenario with such accuracy. However, Joseph and Michael's parents dismissed the comment as an unfortunate coincidence, while others found it highly unusual. In addition to Michael, the defense also pointed the finger at Joseph's other business partner, a man named Dan Cavanaugh, who managed Joseph's online sales. Dan, known as Dan the Hacker due to his computer expertise, worked with Joseph to promote and sell their products online. His compensation was a percentage of the online sales. Dan had previously been on police radar when his ex-girlfriend, Tracy, accused him of confessing to the murders in early 2018. Tracy's claims were dismissed, however, as she had a history of substance abuse and was on bad terms with Dan, leading the authorities to believe she might be trying to falsely incriminate him. According to Charles Merritt's defense team, Dan had a strong motive to harm Joseph. At the end of 2009, Joseph and Dan had clashed over profit distribution. Dan believed he was entitled to a share of not just the online sales but all sales, while Joseph disagreed and initially refused to pay more. Dan allegedly threatened to ruin Joseph's online business by redirecting his website's traffic to adult sites. Ultimately, Joseph agreed to give Dan more money, including his BMW and additional payments. The last of these payments was due around the time of the family's disappearance. After the murders, Dan continued to work with Susan, Michael, and Charles to keep the business running, but he later sold the company in June 2011, pocketing over $100,000. The defense argued that Dan's exclusion from certain projects and lack of payments could have pushed him over the edge. However, Dan had a solid alibi. He was vacationing in Hawaii with his girlfriend during the time of the murders. His ex-girlfriend testified that they were together on February 4, 2010, and posted photos to Facebook as evidence. While some people questioned the validity of social media posts as proof, the ex-girlfriend maintained that she had no reason to lie for Dan, as they were no longer together and had parted on bad terms. The police eventually confirmed that Dan had indeed been in Hawaii at the time of the killings. During the trial, the defense also brought up Joseph's ex-wife's partner, suggesting that he too could have been involved. Joseph had a son named Jonah with his ex-wife, and tensions between Joseph and her new partner had escalated prior to the murders. Nevertheless, the police ruled him out as a suspect. Despite the defense's efforts to shift attention away from Charles Merritt, by June 2019, the jury found Merritt guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. Before the sentencing hearing, the victims' families gave emotional statements. Patrick, Joseph's father, addressed Merritt, saying that Joseph had done so much to help him and his family, particularly when Merritt faced legal troubles in 2009. Susan, Joseph's mother, called Merritt a despicable monster who had brutally killed 2 innocent children, her grandchildren. She labeled him a coward and a baby killer. Summer's sister tearfully shared how their family would forever be scarred by the loss of their loved ones. Joseph's eldest son, Jonah, also spoke, recounting the devastating impact of losing his father, stepmother, and younger siblings when he was just 12 years old. After hearing these victim impact statements, Merritt asked to speak. Through tears, he insisted on his innocence, declaring that he did not commit the murders and did not deserve what was happening to him. "I didn't do it," he said. "With God as my witness, I will prove everyone wrong." He added that he loved Joseph and would never have hurt him or his family. Merritt's sentencing was delayed after he once again requested to dismiss his attorney, though the judge rejected this motion. His legal team also filed for a new trial, accusing the prosecution of misconduct, but this request was also denied. Finally, on January 21, 2020, after years of delays, the San Bernardino Superior Court sentenced Charles Merritt, then 62 years old, to death. Despite the death sentence, it is unlikely that Merritt will ever be executed, as California has not carried out an execution since 2006. Instead, Merritt will likely spend the rest of his life in the death row. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.